The wind swept across the arid plains, carrying the scent of sagebrush and distant rain. The small frontier town of Red Willow was quiet in the late afternoon, the kind of stillness that made every footstep sound louder than it should. In the town square, merchants packed away their goods, and children chased each other, laughing, unaware of the tension that sometimes hung in the air like a storm cloud. She arrived on horseback, her dark hair whipping across her face, and pulled her cloak tighter against the chill. Her family had moved west seeking a new start, but the land, wild and untamed, reminded her daily that they were strangers in this place. As she rode past the saloon, a shout caught her attention, a small commotion between a few settlers and a lone figure. He stood at the edge of the square, tall and strong, with the quiet authority of someone who belonged to the land. His skin was the color of the desert under the midday sun, and his eyes were sharp, watching every movement with calm calculation. A group of settlers, armed with fear and ignorance, surrounded him. They demanded he leave, their voices laced with suspicion and prejudice. The woman's curiosity overcame caution. She dismounted and stepped closer, her boots sinking slightly into the dust. The man didn't flinch as the settlers gestured wildly, trying to intimidate him. There was no anger in his stance, only a steady, measured presence. Something about him made her heart beat faster, not with fear, but with a strange recognition, a sense of safety she hadn't felt in a long time. "Leave him be," she called, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. The settlers turned, startled by her sudden defiance. She ignored the startled looks and marched toward the man. "You're not hurting anyone," she said firmly. "He's done nothing wrong." The Apache's gaze met hers, and for the first time he spoke. His voice was deep, calm, and resonant, carrying the weight of 1,000 stories. "Thank you," he said simply. No pride, no arrogance, just gratitude. The settlers grumbled and muttered under their breath, but eventually they retreated, leaving the square quiet once more. She turned to him, curious. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "No," he replied, his eyes scanning the edges of the town as if ensuring there was no further danger. Then he looked back at her, and a faint smile touched his lips. "But you are brave." Her cheeks warmed. She had expected anger or suspicion from him, maybe even indifference, but not this acknowledgment. "I can't let injustice stand," she said softly. He tilted his head, studying her as though weighing her words. "Most people would not have intervened," he said. "You have courage." A silence settled between them, filled with unspoken questions and possibilities. She didn't know much about him, only that his presence was commanding and somehow comforting. He didn't need to speak loudly or make threats. His very being seemed to demand respect, not through fear, but through the quiet strength of his character. For a moment, the noise of the town faded, leaving just the two of them standing in the dusty square, connected by an invisible thread. She felt something stir deep within her, a curiosity mingled with admiration. She wanted to know more about this man who moved through the world with such certainty, who met hostility not with anger, but with calm dignity. "Would you walk with me?" she asked impulsively, gesturing toward the outskirts of town. He considered her for a heartbeat, then nodded. "I will," he said, and together they stepped into the open plains, where the horizon stretched endless and golden. Promising stories yet untold dot in that first meeting. Neither of them knew how deeply their lives would intertwine, how fragile hearts could find solace in one another, or how love could bloom in the most unlikely of places. All they knew was that they had found a kindred spirit, and sometimes that was the beginning of everything. The plains stretched endlessly, golden under the late afternoon sun, with the wind carrying whispers of sage and distant mountains. The Apache walked with a calm, effortless stride, and she struggled to keep pace, her cloak flapping against her legs. Despite her unease, there was a strange sense of peace in his presence, a quiet reassurance that made the wild land feel less intimidating. They walked in silence at first, letting the wind and the open horizon speak for them. Every so often, he would point out subtle signs in the terrain, the faint tracks of a deer, the song of a distant bird, the way the wind shifted near water. She listened intently, amazed at his connection to the land, and slowly, her initial nervousness melted into fascination. "You can read the land," she said softly. Her voice tinged with awe. He glanced at her, the hint of a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "It speaks," he replied simply. "You only need to pay attention." She realized that his eyes missed nothing: the bent grass, the faint shadow of a coyote, even the smallest bird darting through the air. Every detail seemed to matter, and it was as if he could predict the world before it happened. She, in contrast, was clumsy in her awareness, too used to fences and structured routines. And yet, she felt drawn to his rhythm, as though her own senses were awakening in his presence. As they walked farther from the town, the shadows lengthened and the sun dipped toward the horizon. He led her to a small clearing beside a creek where smooth stones and a few scraggly trees offered a place to rest. She sank to the ground, brushing dust from her skirts, and he settled across from her, careful not to crowd her space. "You are not afraid?" she asked, her voice a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Afraid of what?" he asked, though his eyes scanned the surrounding brush with a natural alertness. "Of people like those settlers," she said. "They could have harmed you, or me for that matter." He shook his head. "Fear is a choice," he said, "but caution is wisdom. I do not confuse one for the other." She studied him, sensing that his words were more than a lesson about safety. They were a reflection of his life, of experiences shaped by struggle and survival. She realized that his calmness was not born of ignorance but of understanding, and in that she found both comfort and admiration. Hours passed in conversation, stories exchanged softly by the flowing creek. She told him of her family's move west, of her hopes for a new life, and the small disappointments and fears she carried. In return, he spoke sparingly, but each word carried weight: tales of his people, lessons learned from the land, and glimpses into the quiet strength that shaped him. At one point, he produced a small carved wooden whistle from his belt. Blowing gently, he called forth a haunting, melodic note that echoed across the plains. She shivered at the beauty of the sound, feeling something stirred deep within her. How do you make that?" she asked. "Practice," he said, handing it to her. "And patience." She tried, fumbling at first, producing only a harsh, awkward note. He laughed softly, a sound that was rich and warm, yet never mocking. "You will learn," he said. "Everything takes time. Even trust." For the first time since arriving in the frontier, she felt seen, not just as a visitor or a stranger, but as someone worthy of respect and attention. And she realized that she, too, wanted to understand him, to walk beside him in both the wild and the unknown corners of his world. As twilight fell, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they sat side by side, a quiet companionship settling over them. Neither spoke of the future, nor did they need to. In the vastness of the plains, among rustling grasses and distant mountains, an unlikely bond was forming, delicate yet unbreakable, rooted in respect, curiosity, and the first whisperings of something deeper. When they finally rose to return to town before nightfall, it was with a sense that their lives had shifted, subtly but irrevocably. They had met as strangers, yet already they had become confidants, each opening a door the other did not yet know existed, and somewhere, beneath the quiet strength of the Apache man and the budding courage of the young woman, the first sparks of love Days passed like the wind across the plains, swift and unrelenting. The woman found herself thinking of the Apache more than she expected, his quiet strength, the way he moved as though the land itself obeyed him, the subtle kindness in his eyes when he noticed her struggles. She had grown accustomed to the rhythm of frontier life. But now there was a new rhythm she could feel, one that pulsed between them, delicate and unspoken. They began spending more time together. First, under the guise of necessity, he needed help repairing traps, scouting the land, and she offered assistance with what little skills she had. But the tasks, meant to occupy their hands, only brought their hearts closer. One morning, they ventured to a small ravine where wild herbs grew. The Apache demonstrated how to identify edible plants, their medicinal properties, and how to avoid those that could harm. She watched his hands, nimble and sure, tracing the leaves and stems with confidence. "It's like you speak to the plants themselves," she remarked. "Odd. They speak if you listen," he replied, his voice soft. Almost a whisper meant only for her. Their hands brushed as he handed her a sprig of sage. She felt a spark, a fleeting jolt that made her stomach tighten. He looked at her with no judgment, only patience, as if he understood that some lessons were learned slowly, even those of the hard dot as the sun climbed higher. They rested by a shaded rock. She dared to ask about his past, his family, and his people. He spoke carefully, revealing stories of loss, survival, and honor, never dwelling on bitterness but on resilience. She shared pieces of herself in return, talking about the home she left behind, the dreams she still nurtured, and the fears that sometimes kept her awake at night. By the time the afternoon faded to gold, a sense of mutual trust had blossomed between them. He had become more than a guide or protector. He was a confidant, someone who saw her not as a fragile outsider, but as a person capable of courage, wit, and tenderness. That evening, as they returned to the town, the sky burned with the colors of sunset, the clouds glowing like embers. She rode close enough to feel his presence beside her, close enough that the warmth of his arm brushed hers. She caught herself stealing glances at him, noticing the curve of his jaw, the intensity of his gaze, the way his hair caught the last rays of light. "You ride well," he said casually. Though she detected the faint note of admiration in his voice. "Not as well as you?" she replied, trying to sound nonchalant but feeling her cheeks grow warm. A silence fell between them, comfortable yet charged with a tension she couldn't name. It was a quiet acknowledgement that something deeper was forming, something fragile, urgent, and beautiful. Over the next several days they shared more than tasks. They shared laughter, quiet moments by the fire, and the unspoken understanding that came from being seen and accepted. He taught her how to track small animals and read the subtle signs in the land. She taught him a few words from her language, songs from her home, and the joy of simple, human connection. One evening, as they sat watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky, she dared a question that had been nagging at her heart. "Do you ever feel alone?" she asked softly. He looked at her, the firelight reflecting in his eyes, and nodded. "Alone is a word without meaning when you are present with someone you trust," he said. "But loneliness can still visit. It is then that one needs courage to face it, to welcome connection when it comes." She felt her pulse quicken, her chest tightening with an emotion she could no longer ignore. It was not fear, but something far more powerful, the first stirrings of love. The awareness that her heart had begun to tether itself to his dot as the fire burned down to embers. They sat in silence, side by side, letting the quiet night embrace them. The world beyond the clearing could be dangerous and uncertain. But here, in this fragile moment, there was trust, warmth, and a bond that neither had expected but both quietly cherished for the first time. She realized that love did not need grand gestures or words spoken aloud. Sometimes it was in the shared glances, the gentle guidance, the quiet companionship of two souls learning to navigate a world together. And so, the bond between the Apache and the woman grew stronger, its roots deepening with every shared moment, every story told, and every unspoken promise that perhaps in time, their hearts would come to match the rhythm of the land itself. The wind had softened to a gentle breeze as twilight descended, painting the plains in muted shades of lavender and gold. The two of them sat atop a low hill, looking out over the land that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. The Apache had been unusually quiet, his eyes tracing the contours of the hills, the shadows of the trees, and the flickering lights of the distant town. She sensed that something was on his mind, though she did not dare ask. Finally, she broke the silence. "You seem thoughtful tonight." He looked at her, his gaze steady and unreadable, and then smiled faintly. "I am always thoughtful," he said. "The land teaches patience, observation, and the weight of choices." She nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. For days she had carried a secret that had grown heavier with each shared laugh, every brush of hands, every word spoken by firelight. Tonight, with the quiet of the plains around them and the intimacy of the stars overhead, she felt compelled to reveal it. Taking a deep breath, she met his gaze. "There's something I must tell you," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "It is personal. Something I fear may change how you see me." He tilted his head, listening with the patience and attention that had drawn her to him in the first place. "Then tell me," he said softly. "I will listen without judgment." She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the words pressing on her chest. I cannot have children," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's not something I can change. I understand if this makes a difference to you." For a long moment, he said nothing. She braced herself for disappointment, anger, or pity. Her heart hammered in her chest, threatening to escape entirely. Then he reached out, his hand brushing gently against hers. The touch was firm but gentle, grounding her. "You have told me the truth," he said. "That is enough. Do you think it changes the way I feel about you?" She shook her head, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I don't know," she admitted. "I worry that it might. That without children, our bond, our life together, it might be incomplete." He took her hand fully in his, turning it so their fingers intertwined. "Love is not measured in children," he said, his voice steady and unwavering. "It is measured in the strength of hearts, the courage to be present, and the willingness to face life together. You have given me all of that, and more." She looked at him, searching his face for any hint of doubt, but found none. Only a quiet certainty that made her chest ache with relief and admiration. "But society, expectations," she began, faltering. "They do not dictate my heart," he interrupted gently. "I do not love you for what you may or may not give me in the future. I love you for who you are. That is enough. That has always been enough." Her lips trembled, and a tear slid down her cheek. "I feared that my past, my limitations, would make me unworthy," she admitted. He lifted a hand to brush the tear away, his thumb gentle against her skin. "Unworthy?" he repeated softly. "Do you think the wind chooses which flowers to favor, or the river chooses which stones to carry? Life does not work in that way, and neither do I. My heart has chosen you." She leaned into him, her forehead resting against his shoulder, and felt the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. It was strong, reassuring, and unwavering. She realized that for the first time she had met someone whose love was unconditional, a love that did not measure worth by fertility or expectation, but by the courage to be present and true. The stars appeared overhead, countless and brilliant, like silent witnesses to the shared moment. The wind whispered through the grasses, carrying the quiet promise of tomorrow. She began, her voice catching. I don't know how to thank you for this, for accepting me as I am. You do not need to thank me, he said. Your truth is gift enough. And because you have been honest with me, I will love you more. Not less, but more, every day, in ways you cannot yet imagine. For the first time in her life, she believed that love could exist without conditions, without measure, and without fear. In the quiet of the plains, with the wind and stars bearing witness, they found solace and strength in one another, a bond unbroken, unshakable, and ready to face whatever challenges the world might bring. And in that silence, shared beneath the vast expanse of the frontier sky, she felt the stirrings of a love that would endure no matter what. The following morning, the plains glimmered with dew, each blade of grass reflecting the first tentative light of dawn. Birds called across the valley, and the wind carried a cool freshness that made the world feel alive and wide open. The woman walked beside the Apache as they moved through the tall grasses, their boots stirring the scent of earth and sage. Though the night had passed, the weight of her confession lingered in her chest. She had revealed her deepest fear, the truth she had carried alone for so long, and now, though his words had been comforting, a part of her still worried. Was it enough? Could love truly endure the absence of children, the traditional markers of family that society valued so dearly? The Apache seemed to sense her unease. He walked in silence for a while, then finally spoke, his voice low and steady, like the rhythm of the river cutting through the canyon below. You worry that our lives together will be incomplete. She hesitated, then nodded, the faintest tremor in her voice betraying her anxiety. I know you said it doesn't matter, but... She trailed off, uncertain how to articulate the depth of her fear. He stopped walking and turned to face her fully. The sunlight glinted on his hair and the high cheekbones of his face, and she could see the absolute clarity in his gaze. It matters only what we choose, he said firmly. I have chosen you. That is enough. You do not owe me anything more than your presence, your trust, your heart. That is everything I could hope for. Her throat tightened. But love has limits. Life has expectations. He shook his head gently. Not ours. Not what we make together. Love is not a ledger of debts or obligations. It is a choice we make each day to stand together, to care, to protect, to cherish. That is how it grows, not through society's rules, not through children, but through devotion. She studied him, searching his eyes for any hint of doubt. There was none. Only the unwavering certainty of someone who had faced hardship and emerged with clarity about what mattered most. She realized that this man's love was not conditional. It was steadfast, rooted in the heart, not circumstance. He stepped closer, closing the small distance between them, and took her hands in his. The touch was grounding, gentle, yet it carried the quiet strength she had come to rely on. I will love you more, he said simply, for the moments you fear are impossible, for the silence you think is empty, for the parts of you you believe are unworthy. I will love all of it, and all of you. Tears pricked her eyes, but they were not of sadness. They were tears of relief, gratitude, and awe. She had feared that her truth would create distance, yet here was proof that love could transcend every limitation she had imagined. More? She whispered, trying to wrap her mind around the enormity of his promise. More, he repeated, firm and certain. Because love is not limited. It is not measured by children, by wealth, or by tradition. It is measured by courage, by presence, and by the willingness to stay through storms and sunshine alike. That is the love I offer you. Her heart, long weighed down by doubt and fear, felt as if it had been lifted by the wind. She realized that this was more than reassurance. It was a promise of partnership, of unwavering commitment. She could trust him, not because of what he said, but because of the steadiness in his eyes, the quiet confidence in his movements, the undeniable truth in his voice. For the first time, she felt free to imagine a life together unburdened by expectation or limitation. She could imagine days of laughter, nights of quiet conversation, shared walks across the plains, and the gentle rhythm of a love that existed for its own sake. And in that moment, standing together under the open sky, she understood that love, when true, does not measure, does not demand, does not count. It simply is a force that nurtures, sustains, and grows stronger with every passing day. She leaned into him, her head resting lightly on his shoulder, and felt the warmth and security of his embrace. "I believe you," she whispered, "and I will show you," he replied, his hand tracing a slow, comforting path along her arm. "Every day, in every way, you will see how much I love you, not less because of what is missing, but more because of everything you are." The plains stretched before them, endless and wild, but for the first time, the vastness felt comforting rather than intimidating. In his presence, love had become a tangible force, a promise that no hardship, no expectation, and no fear could ever diminish. The quiet peace of the plains was shattered one morning by the distant sound of shouting and hoofbeats. Smoke rose from the far edge of the town, curling like dark fingers into the sky. The woman felt a chill run down her spine. Danger was close, and this time, it wasn't just the uncertainty of the wild, it was people. "They've come again," she whispered, her hand instinctively gripping the Apache's arm. "Settlers. They're angry." He nodded, already scanning the horizon. "We must be cautious. But we will face this together." Together they rode toward the commotion, moving swiftly yet quietly through the tall grass. As they neared the town, they saw the chaos. A small group of settlers, armed and furious, confronted a neighboring Apache family, demanding that they leave immediately. Fear and misunderstanding had ignited, and the situation was on the brink of violence. The Apache dismounted, his presence commanding attention without threat. His calm, steady demeanor contrasted sharply with the settler's anger, and slowly he began to speak, not with shouting, but with reasoned words that carried the weight of authority and respect. The woman stayed close, feeling both awe and anxiety. One settler, emboldened by numbers, raised a rifle. "We won't have your kind here," he shouted. "You need to leave now." The Apache's eyes were steady, unflinching. "This land is not yours to claim," he said quietly, yet every word carried power. "We have lived here, survived here, and protected it. Your anger does not give you right. Leave and no harm will come. Stay, and there will be consequences you cannot control." The tension hung thick in the air. The woman's heart raced as she watched the settlers hesitate. The Apache's unwavering courage was magnetic, and even those who had come with hostility began to falter. Suddenly, a shot rang out, and chaos erupted. He moved like a shadow, protective and precise, pulling her behind a rock, shielding her from danger. She felt the raw power of his presence, a combination of strength, intelligence, and unspoken trust. "Stay close," he whispered, and she obeyed instinctively. Through the tumult, he protected not only her, but also the Apache family under attack, guiding them to safety while diffusing the situation with a combination of authority and compassion. His strategy was flawless, yet it was his calm courage, his refusal to yield to fear, that truly commanded respect. After the immediate threat passed, the woman exhaled, trembling. "You saved them all," she said, awe and relief mingling in her voice. He looked at her, a faint smile touching his lips. "We saved them together," he corrected gently. And you were brave. You stayed close when it mattered most. She shook her head, overwhelmed by gratitude and admiration. I was scared, she admitted. Fear is natural, he said softly. Courage is what we choose to do despite it. Today, we chose together. That is what matters. As they walked back to the plains, the weight of the morning lingered. The woman realized that danger had revealed something deeper in both of them, their ability to rely on each other, trust each other implicitly, and protect what they loved without hesitation. Later, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky with fiery streaks, they sat by a small creek to rest. The day's events had tested them, shaken them, and yet strengthened the bond that had been quietly growing. She dared a question, her voice hesitant but earnest. Do you think we can survive this life? He took her hand, holding it firmly. Not only survive, he said, but thrive. Together, we can face storms, threats, and all that comes our way. Alone, each of us is strong. Together, we are unstoppable. The woman leaned into him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart against her cheek. In that moment, she understood that love was not just about tenderness or promises. It was about courage, trust, and the willingness to face the world, no matter how dangerous, with someone who would never let go. The plains, vast and untamed, seemed less threatening now. Danger had a face, but so did courage. And in each other, they had found a strength neither had known they possessed, a strength that would carry them through every trial. The days following the confrontation left the plains quiet but heavy with reflection. The woman walked beside the Apache in a thoughtful silence, each step stirring the dust beneath their boots. Though the immediate danger had passed, she felt the weight of her own fears pressing against her heart. She realized that surviving the threat outside was easier than confronting the insecurity she carried within. I keep thinking. She began hesitantly, about everything I've lost. My home, my family's approval, the life I imagined. And now, her voice faltered. I fear I might never truly belong anywhere. He stopped and turned to her, his eyes steady, unwavering. Belonging is not given, he said quietly. It is earned through courage, honesty, and the willingness to walk through life as your true self. You have done all of these, even when you did not believe it. She looked down, unsure whether to believe him. I've always felt different. Not enough. Not like those around me. He reached out, lifting her chin gently so that she met his gaze. Enough is not measured by others. It is measured by the heart that beats in you, by the strength you show when no one is watching, by the love you give freely. You are more than enough. And you have always been. Her chest tightened, tears threatening to spill. For the first time, she realized that her own self-doubt had been the fiercest adversary she had faced. And yet, in his presence, she could imagine a path toward acceptance of herself and of the love they shared. He spoke then of his own past, of burdens he had carried silently. I have faced loss, he said, voice heavy but calm. I have been judged for who I am and where I come from. I have feared rejection. But I have learned that true strength comes not from hiding, but from embracing what is within. Only then can you protect and love freely. Her hand found his, and she squeezed it gently, understanding dawning within her. They were not so different, despite the worlds that had shaped them. Each carried wounds, fears, and scars, yet each had survived, and in that survival lay a profound capacity for love and courage. Over the next several days, they worked together to mend fences, repair shelters, and tend to the land. Their cooperation was seamless, a dance of understanding and mutual respect. But it was the quiet moments in between, sharing a meal by the fire, watching the sun sink behind distant hills, or laughing over minor mistakes that cemented their bond. One evening, as twilight spilled across the plains, the woman spoke again. "I've spent so long hiding from who I am," she confessed. "I've been afraid of rejection, of failing, of everything. But with you, I feel like I could be stronger, like I could face what I've avoided for so long." He placed a hand over her heart, warm and reassuring. "That is what love does," he said simply. "It does not erase fear, but it gives you the courage to face it. It does not remove the past, but it teaches you to learn from it. And it does not promise an easy life, but it promises that you will never face it alone." For the first time, she allowed herself to envision a life not dictated by fear or limitation, but by choice and presence. She could imagine walking beside him through storms, through joy, through sorrow and triumph alike. She could imagine growing stronger because of him, and with him as they sat on a ridge watching the stars begin to pierce the darkening sky. He whispered, "We are not perfect. We are not without flaws. But together, we are more than we were alone. That is what matters. That is what love means." She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. It was a rhythm that echoed her own, and she realized that, for the first time, she felt truly anchored. The Apache's quiet strength had become a mirror for her own courage, and in that reflection, she found the bravery to confront the parts of herself she had long avoided. The night settled over the plains, gentle and unrelenting, as if the land itself bore witness to their transformation. They had faced threats, fears, and uncertainties, yet they had emerged not only stronger but closer than ever. And in that closeness, they found the profound truth that love was not merely a feeling, but a force that could heal, strengthen, and sustain them both. Even in a world as unpredictable and untamed as the frontier, the first light of morning stretched across the plains, painting everything in soft gold. The Apache and the woman sat near a quiet creek, the water reflecting the sky like liquid glass. Despite the serenity, a tension lingered, a storm that had nothing to do with the weather. Word had come that her family, unsettled by their growing closeness to the Apache, wanted her to return home immediately. They feared the implications of her relationship with him and insisted she leave the frontier behind. Simultaneously, the Apache's tribe called him to a council several days' ride away, a duty he could not ignore. Both paths threatened to separate them, each demanding loyalty in different ways. She looked at him, the weight of uncertainty pressing on her. "They want me to go back," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't know what to do." He studied her with calm intensity, the same unwavering gaze that had given her courage before. "And the council demands I leave," he said. "We are at a crossroads. But the question is not what others want, it is what we choose for ourselves." Her chest tightened. "If I go, I might never see you again." "And if you leave?" She hesitated, afraid to finish the thought. He reached out, taking her hands in his. "Then we face this together," he said firmly. "Our choices define our lives. We cannot control others, but we can control our hearts." They spent the day walking along the creek, speaking little, each lost in thought. The Apache stopped occasionally to point out subtle details in the land, a bent branch, a fresh track, the whisper of the wind through the grass. Each observation grounded her, reminded her of his strength, and reinforced the bond that had grown between them as the sun dipped lower. She finally asked the question that had been gnawing at her since morning. "What do we do?" He paused, considering carefully. "We choose each other. That is the only choice that matters. The rest, the expectations, the fear, the pressure, they are outside our control. But our hearts are ours to command." Tears pricked her eyes. "But what about duty? What about family, tradition?" He lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. Duty is important, but it does not outweigh love. Tradition is a guide, not a cage. I will not deny my heart, and I will not ask you to deny yours. We decide our own path. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the gentle murmur of the creek and the rustle of the wind through the grass. Then, slowly she nodded, feeling the weight lift from her chest. Then, "I choose you," she said softly. "And I choose you," he replied, his voice steady and unwavering. The decision was simple in words but profound in consequence. By choosing each other, they were defying expectations, risking uncertainty, and embracing a life that was wholly their own. It was a declaration of love that required courage they had both discovered within themselves over the past weeks. That evening, they built a small fire near the creek, the flames dancing in the twilight. As they sat together, the warmth of the fire mirrored the warmth growing between them, a tangible reminder of the life they had chosen to share. "You're sure?" she asked, resting her head against his shoulder. "Absolutely," he said, pressing a gentle kiss to her hair. "Our path is not easy, but it is ours. And that makes it worth every challenge." She felt a surge of relief and hope, the kind that comes only when one truly knows that love is mutual, unconditional, and unwavering. "Then we face it together," she said, determination creeping into her voice. "Yes," he whispered. Together. Under the vast expanse of stars that blanketed the plains that night, they held each other, their hearts beating in quiet harmony. The future remained uncertain, the challenges looming, but their choice had been made. They had claimed each other in a world that often demanded compromise and conformity. And in that choice they found not only love but freedom to be themselves. Together, against all odds, the plains stretched wide and untamed. But for the first time, the horizon no longer seemed frightening. Whatever came, they would face it as one, their bond a testament to courage, love, and the power. The first light of morning bathed the plains in a soft, golden glow. The Apache and the woman sat outside their small shelter, a simple structure they had built together on a gentle rise overlooking the valley. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of sage and earth, and the world seemed to hold its breath in quiet anticipation. After days of turmoil, choices, and tests of courage, they had claimed a space of their own, a home not dictated by tradition, duty, or fear, but by their shared commitment to one another. It was modest, yet it felt expansive, filled with the promise of a life fully theirs. The woman adjusted the small bundle of herbs she had gathered, glancing at the Apache. "It feels real," she said softly, "that we've chosen this life together, and it's ours. No one else can dictate it." He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "It is real," he said, "and it is ours. Every choice, every step, every moment is a testament to the courage we've shown. We have faced fear, uncertainty, and expectations, and we have chosen each other above all." They spent the morning tending to their small home and the surrounding land. He repaired a section of the fence while she swept the floor and arranged a few personal belongings, small tokens of the world they had left behind, mingling with the wildness of the frontier. Each movement was quiet and deliberate, a rhythm of domesticity that felt strangely intimate as they paused to rest. The Apache produced a small, worn carving from his satchel, a simple figure, etched from wood, depicting two figures standing side by side. "I made this for us," he said, "to remind us that our bond is not fleeting. It is carved like this, into the world we are building together." She took it, running her fingers over the rough-hewn edges, feeling the care and intention behind it. "It's beautiful," she whispered, emotion thick in her voice. It means everything. He reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "Love is not measured in wealth or children," he said. "It is measured in presence, in loyalty, and in shared effort. That is the life we are choosing. That is the legacy we create." She felt a warmth in her chest, a steady reassurance that had been growing since the day they first met. The world outside could be harsh, prejudiced, and unpredictable, but here, in this small corner of the plains, they had found stability and joy. It was a love that thrived not because of ease, but because of choice and devotion. They spent the afternoon exploring the surrounding land, sharing laughter as they stumbled across wildflowers and navigated the rough terrain. Each discovery, each small triumph, reinforced their sense of partnership. They were not merely surviving together, they were thriving, creating a life rich with connection, respect, and care. As twilight approached, painting the sky in brilliant streaks of orange and pink, they returned to their shelter. The woman rested her head against the Apache's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I've never known a love like this," she said softly. "It is rare," he admitted, voice quiet and reflective. "Because it is chosen, not expected. Because it is nurtured, not demanded. We have faced life's challenges and decided every day that we belong to each other. That is what makes it extraordinary." She smiled, a tear glinting in the corner of her eye. "Then let us keep choosing each other," she whispered. "And we will," he said, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Every day, in every way, we will choose love. Not because it is easy, but because it is true." The night settled over the plains, stars emerging like scattered diamonds above them. In the stillness, they sat side by side, hands intertwined, hearts beating in quiet harmony. The world beyond their home could be uncertain, dangerous and unforgiving, but within their chosen life, they had found a love that was unwavering, resilient, and wholly their own. In that moment, they understood the profound truth of their journey. Love was not a reward or a promise of perfection. It was a commitment to face life together, to support one another, and to cultivate a bond that would endure, no matter what storms lay ahead. And in that commitment, they found peace, strength, and a joy deeper than either had ever known. The plains stretched endlessly, bathed in the soft glow of dawn. The air smelled of dew, sage, and earth, carrying the quiet promise of a new day. The Apache and the woman sat together on a low hill, their small home visible in the distance, smoke curling gently from the chimney. Life had returned to its rhythm, simple, steady, and full of meaning. They had faced fear, expectation, and separation. They had confronted their own doubts, scars, and insecurities. And through it all, they had chosen each other, day after day, moment after moment. That choice had grown into something far deeper than passion or companionship. It had become a love that endured, unshakable and profound. The woman rested her head against the Apache's shoulder, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "It amazes me," she whispered, "how something so quiet can feel so powerful." He smiled faintly, pressing a gentle kiss to her hair. "Love is often quiet," he said, "but it is no less strong. It shapes our lives, carries us through trials, and binds us in ways the world cannot understand." She thought of the path they had walked together, the first meeting in the town square, the long days learning to trust each other, the confession of her fears, the dangers they had faced, and the choices that had defined their lives. Every step had led them here, to a life they had built together from courage, patience, and devotion. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly, eyes searching his face. He shook his head. "Never. Every challenge, every hardship, every doubt only brought us closer. Love is not measured by ease or convenience. It is measured by commitment, by presence, and by the willingness to endure together." and I would choose you always." Tears welled in her eyes, not from sorrow, but from gratitude and awe. "I feared that I was not enough," she admitted, "that I could never give you what the world expects. But you have shown me that love does not demand. It nurtures. It strengthens. It survives." He held her hands in his, fingers entwined like the roots of the trees around them. "Then I will just love you more," he said, his voice soft but unwavering. "For every fear you face, for every doubt you hold, for every part of you that the world fails to recognize. I will love it all, and I will love you all." She rested against him, feeling the warmth of his presence seep into her bones. Around them, the plains whispered with the wind, the grass bending and swaying like a living testament to their journey. They were a small part of a vast, untamed world, yet in each other, they had found a home far larger than any structure or boundary could provide. Seasons passed, each one marked not by grand events, but by quiet moments of shared life, tending the land, watching the sunrise together, exchanging stories beneath the stars, laughing at small victories, and comforting each other in moments of sorrow. Their love was neither dramatic nor flashy. It was steady, enduring, and wholly real. One evening, as they sat by the fire outside their home, the woman looked into his eyes, a soft smile lighting her face. "We have built something beautiful," she said. He nodded, his gaze reflecting the flickering flames and the depth of his heart. "Not something, but everything," he replied. "A life defined by love, chosen freely and nurtured daily. That is our legacy." She leaned against him, and in the quiet of the night, the vast plains stretching endlessly before them, they understood that their story was not defined by what they lacked, by tradition, or by the expectations of others. It was defined by the choices they made, the courage they displayed, and the unwavering devotion they shared. And as the stars emerged, "Countless and brilliant," she whispered, "then we will keep loving each other, no matter what." "Always," he replied, holding her close. "Always and more every day." The world around them remained vast, unpredictable, and untamed. But within the circle of their love, they had found a sanctuary, a strength, and a joy that no trial could diminish. Their hearts, entwined and steadfast, became a testament to the enduring power of love, a love that did not demand, did not judge, and did not falter. And so, beneath the endless sky of the frontier, they lived their days together, leaving behind not children or grand legacies, but something far rarer and more enduring, a story of love that transcended fear, expectation,